Hi everyone, I'm the Tax Pro, and today we're going to talk about what to do if you owe the IRS money but you can't pay them. So first things first, we're talking about the IRS. State and city jurisdictions may have different regulations as far as when tax expires, etc. So we're going to talk about the IRS today. Just recognize that your state and or local government may have some different programs. Sometimes they're very, very similar or identical, but oftentimes there are differences there. So we're going to talk about the IRS. We are also talking about income taxes. So other types of taxes with the IRS may have different requirements. We're going to talk about income taxes for individuals and businesses. When it comes to the IRS owing them money, there's a couple of things that a lot of people don't realize. One of those is that the IRS only has so many years to collect the tax once it has been assessed before it is just automatically considered forgiven, so to speak. That is 10 years as long as certain things don't happen, certain factors aren't present. So the IRS has 10 years from the date of assessment to collect that tax. Certain activities may toll that statute for collection, such as applying for an offer in compromise. What that means is that that 10-year time clock is essentially paused when certain things happen, and then it is started again once, something is evaluated or looked at, etc. So one of the most important things to take away from that is that if the IRS has not assessed the tax, that 10 years has not started yet. This is why it's really important to go ahead and file your tax return, even if you know that you are going to owe, for a number of reasons. Number one, it starts that 10-year statute. The IRS can then assess the tax on your account. The tax has to be assessed on your account so that the IRS has the ability to start trying to collect, okay? Number two, when you owe the IRS money, you start accruing penalties and interest. There is a failure to file penalty and there is a failure to pay penalty. Those are separate, okay? Your failure to file penalty stops accruing once you file your tax return, right? So it's based on the length of time that your tax return is overdue. And then it's also based on the amount that you owe. But once you file your tax return, you then stop that failure to file penalty from just snowballing out of control, right? Failure to pay penalty, on the other hand, will continue to accrue. But we want to go ahead and get that tax assessed so we can start that 10-year statute. Now, a lot of people say, yeah, but once we get the tax assessed, then they can start collections activities. Yes, they can. They can then start your collections activities, okay? So what can the IRS do in order to collect that tax? The IRS can do quite a few things. So the IRS can go ahead and put a lien on your house and other assets that you may own. A lien is going to happen oftentimes until the tax is paid off, right? So a lot of people will say, oh, well, I have a lien on my home. I'm going to get in an installment plan so that lien is removed. Generally, the IRS will not remove the lien, even if you get in an installment plan, which I'm going to talk about here in a minute. The IRS will remove liens in certain instances where you are trying to sell an asset, and the IRS will then benefit because you will be able to pay on what you owe the IRS. Okay, there are certain steps that you take in order to have that lien removed so that the IRS can then collect tax. So the IRS will put liens on things the IRS can also levy. So when I have clients come to me, they get really scared about levies. Oftentimes they're like, the IRS is going to seize my assets. I'm really nervous. So a lien is different from a levy. A lien essentially just gives the IRS the right to, stop you from selling an asset without paying them, essentially. So, for example, if you own a home and you have a mortgage, a bank is going to have a lien on your home. That means that if you were to sell that home, the bank is going to be the first one paid, right? Same thing with the IRS. They're going to put a lien on your assets so that if you go to sell those assets, the IRS has to get paid first, okay? Levies are different in that a levy is an action where the IRS or another entity actually seizes property. So they levy your bank account where they are going to actually take money out of your bank account. The IRS does have the power to also seize assets such as real estate, etc. Okay? I want to stress that a levy is a very aggressive action from the IRS. If you owe the IRS money and you are working with the IRS to get them paid or to come to some sort of conclusion, the IRS doesn't want to sit and just levy your bank account all the time. The IRS just wants you to cooperate with them when it comes to paying the tax that you owe. Okay, so I know that a levy is very scary. It's a very scary thought that the IRS has the power to levy your account, but I don't want you to just be paralyzed because you're scared of that. Okay? We still want to get a resolution and get you into compliance with the IRS, which doesn't mean necessarily immediately paying all of your taxes, okay? You can be in compliance and be in an installment agreement, for example, which I'm going to go over here in a minute. So a levy is what happens when the IRS is like, hey, you're not getting it. We need paid, okay? And at that point in time, they then levy your account. I also want to stress that as a taxpayer, you have what we call the Taxpayer Bill of Rights. You have certain legal rights when you owe the government money, okay? For when you owe the IRS money. You have certain legal rights. The IRS cannot violate those legal rights, okay? So you are somewhat protected here. So I want, if you owe the IRS money, I want you to know that it's not the end of the world. There are solutions here. And even though you may be feeling a lot of anxiety over it, it's okay, all right? There are options here. We just need to make sure that we're proactively exploring those options and selecting one that works for you, okay? So let me go over some of the main, I'm just gonna briefly explain some of the main areas in which, or in one of the main methods in which we can resolve tax debt, okay? Offer and compromise is probably the one that most people are going to reference or know about. An offer and compromise, this is right off the IRS website. An offer and compromise allows you to settle your tax debt for less than the full amount you owe. Okay, a lot of people want to do an offer and compromise. This is like, you saw on a commercial, oh, I settled my tax debt for pennies on the dollar. They're talking about an offer and compromise, okay? Offer and compromise essentially allows you to go to the IRS and say, listen, I understand that I owe you money. I cannot pay this tax debt in full. I can't do it. Or if the cash exists, if I pay you, that's all the cash that I have. And then it's going to create a financial hardship for me. I won't be able to pay my bills, eat, etc. The IRS doesn't just settle for pennies on the dollar if you have the ability to pay. And it's not going to create a financial hardship, okay? Not everybody qualifies for an offer and compromise. A lot of people want to qualify, but not everybody does. So This is straight from the IRS website. Obviously, it's more complex when we actually are preparing the offer in compromise. We consider your unique set of facts and circumstances, including ability to pay, your income, your expenses, and your asset equity. What this is saying is the IRS is going to look at, do you actually have the ability to pay or not? What is your income level? For example, if you owe the IRS $50,000, but every single year you're bringing home $300,000, and you don't have any outrageous expenses, like somebody has a significant medical issue in your family, the IRS is going to say, in the 10 years that we have to collect your tax, we're going to be able to collect it. So you're probably not going to be eligible for an offer in compromise. Whereas if you owe the IRS $60,000 and you had a very significant medical issue, which left you unable to pay your tax bill, and your earning potential has gone down because maybe you're, partially on disability now or something along those lines, that's a different circumstance. Okay? That's a completely different circumstance. The IRS will consider the facts of your case, and you may be eligible for an offer in compromise. Okay? Also, they're going to look at asset equity. What this means is if you have 10 different rental properties and you can sell one of those rental properties and pay off your IRS debt, you're probably not going to qualify for an offer in compromise, right? Because the IRS is going to expect you to be able to sell that asset. There are certain assets that the IRS will not take into consideration here, such as a personal residence, that kind of thing, as long as you're not living in a significantly expensive property. The IRS will consider those things. So see here, we generally approve an offer in compromise when the amount you offer represents the most we can expect to collect within a reasonable period of time. So a lot of people say, well, how does this even work? You have to fill out a bunch of financial information in order to apply for an offer in compromise, okay? So I'm not going to go into the hows because this video would be extremely long. I'm just here to show you some of the options that we utilize, and then in later videos, I'll go into more depth. So this gives you additional information, who is eligible. This is a great place to start if you're interested in an offer in compromise. And I say to start because it's not going to provide you with all the information that you need, right? So there's step-by-step instructions in Form 656B, the offer in compromise booklet. Very interesting read. And then you can also have a payment option, so you can do a lump sum, like an initial payment, or you could do a periodic payment. That's an offer in compromise. Let's talk about payment plans. Payment plans are also called installment agreements. There are full pay and partial pay installment agreements. Full pay means that by the time that 10-year statute is up, based on the installment agreement that you set up, you will have paid the full amount that you owe, including penalties and interest. Partial pay, on the other hand, says you're not going to end up paying the full amount that you owe. For example, if you owe $50,000, maybe your partial pay installment plan has you paying $30,000 over the course of, the 10 years prior to that expiration of that tax. You're not going to end up paying all of it. The partial pay has you paying a portion of it. Installment plans, there is a setup fee. You do have to pay in order to get on an installment plan. This is the frequently asked questions. Very interesting. You can apply for certain payment plans online depending on the amount that you owe. However, you may not be eligible to. And here, there are some forms that you can take a look at. Form 9465 and Form 433. So a lot of people ask, well, how do they determine the amount that I'm able to pay? This form 433 series, so there's like an A, B, C, D. You'll see this one's F. This provides the information to the IRS that helps them determine whether or not you have the cash flow. It looks at your actual monthly expenses, your actually monthly income, and then it looks to see what is your cash flow like. If you have a positive cash flow of, $10,000, the IRS is probably not going to, even after expenses, the IRS probably isn't going to buy that you can't afford to pay them $1,000 a month, right? Whereas if you have a negative cash flow, that's another story. So that's payment plans with the IRS. Payment plans make a great option Depending on the amount that you owe, you can actually apply right online and get approved pretty much immediately. And then you can get started, you can stay in compliance. If you are in an installment plan, as long as you are properly filing your current year tax filings and you are paying your estimated tax payments, you're considered in compliance. Okay, as long as you don't owe on any other taxes, the IRS isn't going to actively levy your accounts or your assets. Okay, they're not going to seize your assets if you're in an installment plan and you're compliant with your installment plan. Now, they may review your installment plan and determine that you can now pay more if your circumstances change. But when you're in an installment plan and you're paying your estimated taxes, the IRS, and you're filing your tax returns, the IRS is not going to come and seize your assets. Okay? They do that when you are unwilling to voluntarily pay your tax debt. So an installment plan is a great option. A great option if you can make monthly payments. Now, let's say that you just have no cash flow at all. Okay? You may qualify for Currently Not Collectible. This is on the Taxpayer Advocate Service website. This is a independent government organization that its purpose is to advocate for the taxpayer. Currently Not Collectible means that you literally have no cash available to pay the IRS. There's none. There's nothing there. You don't have any cash flow in which you can go into an installment plan. There's nothing there for you to pay the IRS. That is currently not collectible. Currently not collectible can be a temporary status, and it may be reviewed, okay, to see if you're still eligible for currently not collectible. Currently not collectible stops the collections activities from the IRS for a period of time. Because the IRS evaluates your financials, says that you can't pay, puts you in currently not collectible, and then they don't actively try to collect. Now, if your financial circumstances change, that's a different story. They will then pull you out of currently not collectible, and then collections activities start. At that point in time, you may need to look at an offer and compromise or an installment agreement. Currently not collectible can be a great tool if you just don't have the cash. Okay, you don't have the ability to go out and earn. Something happened. Currently not collectible can be a really good tool. It's also a really good tool if you're getting close to that 10 years. It's a great tool to sit in if you qualify to ride out that 10 years for the statute. And then the tax just goes away, essentially, after it expires. So that's a breakdown of the most common options that we see. Now, obviously, if you don't owe the tax, that's a whole nother beast. I'm talking about if you actually owe the tax, if it's a legitimate tax debt, okay? So in summary, there is 10 years that the IRS gets to collect the tax from you. We're talking about income tax and we're talking about the IRS, right? That 10 years can be paused when certain things happen, such as an application for an offer and compromise. So that 10 years isn't always 10 years from the date of assessment. It might be 10 years plus we had a couple of tolling scenarios that extended that 10 years. In general, the most common options that we utilize are offer and compromise, installment agreements, which can be full or partial pay, and currently not collectible. Now, I want to stress that if anybody starts talking to you about the Fresh Start Initiative, it's probably a marketing gimmick. The Fresh Start Initiative was something that the IRS came out with years ago. It's no longer called that, okay? But there's a lot of gimmicky tax resolution firms that still use the term Fresh Start Initiative. It is technically not in existence any longer. So make sure that you're careful if you're going to get professional assistance. Make sure that it's not like a gimmicky firm that's going to advertise things or try to push you into like the Fresh Start Initiative and we're one of the only firms that does that. They might be one of the only firms that does that because it's really not called that anymore. So that's what I have for this video. I will see you guys in other videos, and then I'll go over like offer and compromise and installment plans and currently not collectible in more depth. I hope that was helpful, and I'll see you guys next time.